Today I'd like to discuss 3 different procs for summarizing continuous data in your data set. So today we're going to be using the student underscore data set that is posted on Angel. So that data set is saved here. So I'm going to start by pulling that data set into SAS. I'm going to do that using a libname. And when I run my libname, I will see that I have several data sets in my library. We're going to focus on the student data set today. If we open this data set, we have several different variables. It should look somewhat familiar. We have a variable for IQ, a variable for age, and a variable for GPA. These are the continuous variables we're going to work with today. There are 3 different procs that I want to cover. We're going to start with the proc that has a lot of output with it, and that's Proc univariate. Proc univariate will give you, just like it sounds, all of the univariate statistics that go along with your particular quantitative variable. So I'm going to tell SAS the proc name, so it's proc and then the word univariate, data equals, and I've got class.studentData, because I'm just going to work with the data set that is in my library called class. So class is the library name set here, and student data is the data set name. Let's work with the variable age. In order to tell proc univariate which variables you want to use, you would give it the var statement, and then the variable name, followed by the semicolon, and finally a run. When we run that statement, we will get a load of output in the window. So you can see we get all of the different quantitative statistics one by one. We have a mean, a standard deviation. We have measures of skewness, which can be important for different types of analyses. We also have the median and mode. Other types of variability, such as the variance, the range, or the interquartile range. We also have the actual quantiles down here. And finally, on the next page, we have any extreme observations in the data set. So in this case, 19 is our lowest value for our age, and 26 is our highest value, followed by 25. And Proc univariate also gives you the observation numbers for each of those values. An interesting option that can be added to Proc univariate is the plot option. And when we run that, we can also see that we get box plots, a stem and leaf plot, as well as a normal probability plot that we can use to determine the properties of our continuous variable. Moving on to the next proc, we have proc summary. Now, in older versions of SAS, you may need to include in the proc line the word print. Just like proc univariate, proc summary starts with a proc and then summary, because that's the name of the proc. Again, we're going to tell it what data set to use, data equals class.studentData. And again, I'm including that print option because for older versions of proc summary, you need to tell it to actually print the output to the screen. Again, we'll use the variable age. So just like proc univariate, we have var statement, var, followed by whatever variable names we want to print. And then finally our run. If we do that, we'll get a very simple output, obviously much less information compared to proc univariate. We have the mean, the standard deviation, the min, and the max. Finally, we have proc means. For proc means, it's similar to proc univariate and proc summary. Proc, the word means, give it your data set name, and by default, proc means will print to the window, so we don't need to add any additional information there yet. Then we have the var statement, and we tell it age. This time, let's also give it GPA and IQ. So if you wanted to do multiple variables, you would simply list them with spaces in between each variable name, and then finally run. When we run that, we see that the output looks very similar to Proc summary in that we have the mean, the standard deviation, the min, and the max. And now you can see because I added those additional variables, we now have a line for each of those as well. Importantly, you can ask for additional information from Proc means. There are many, many, many keywords that you can ask for, but in this case, I'm just going to talk about a few. So you can ask for all of the different measures of central tendency, mean, median, and mode. And if you do that, it will only include those different options. It won't give you the standard deviation, the min, or the max. It will only give you the mean, the median, and the mode, because that's what we asked for on the Proc line. Similarly, we can also ask for the standard deviation, appropriately abbreviated STD. We can ask for the min, we can ask for the max, and increase our output. And so you can see now we have all of that information printed for each of those variables on the 3 different lines. Occasionally you'll be asked to produce something like this, except for individual groups. So if we wanted to, say, get this for male and female, let's check the label for our variable. It's called gender. We would add what they call a class statement. Class tells SAS to separate the variables by this individual grouping variable, in this case gender. If we run that, what we'll see is that we actually have 3 categories for gender because female has been spelled with both a lowercase f and an uppercase f. So this would be a place where we would want to go back through and recode gender so that it was appropriate, and then run this mean statement again, but you can see that you would get the values for individual groups so that you could compare across 2 groups. You can also do this with what they call a by statement. So rather than class, if we change that to by, SAS will now compute these values by the grouping variable gender, and if we look back, we will see that we have very different results. We have these weird dots in our output. Now in SAS, sometimes dots are okay. It just means that they didn't have enough variability to actually compute that value. However, if we go to our log, we can check to see that we have received an error. Whenever you're using the by statement, your data set always has to be sorted by that particular variable. In this case, the error is very informative. It says the data set is not sorted by the grouping variable gender, and it tells you that it's confused by the fact that it's having 2 genders next to one another. So we can add a sort statement that we did back a few lessons ago, like this. And again, it told us what variable it wanted sorted by. It wants it to be sorted by gender, and run. Now, if we run this same code again, you'll see that we get output for each of our different levels of gender. Again, these dots just indicate that SAS couldn't actually compute this value, not that there was an error, and we can check our log to confirm that. Finally, occasionally you will also need to output a data set with this information in it. So we're going to also use the output statement. Now in this case, let's just say we only wanted the mean. We're going to use class, gender, and we'll do it only for the variable age. Now we're going to add a line called output out. After out, you're going to specify a new dataset name. So we'll call this gender underscore age. We're going to have it output the mean for us, the mean of age, and we'll call it age mean. Now, whenever I output a data set, I like to create a new variable so that if I were to merge this data set back into my original, I don't overwrite previous data and previous variables with similar names. If I run that, I'll get output in my window, but I should also see that in my work folder, a new data set has been created, which is what I told it to do as part of this out statement. And in that, we have 4 lines of data. The reason that we have that is that whenever you use the class option to create these data sets, you have to include an option called NWay. NWay tells SAS not to print this summary line of data, that first line that you see that tells about everything. It will just now print the lines with values for the different genders. If we run that again and go back to our data set, we can see now that SAS has suppressed that additional line of data. These are all valuable tricks to know for when you're working with SAS so that you can actually go through and create these output data sets without having additional information that you do not need. And that's it for Proc univariate, Proc summary, and Proc means, and how to summarize continuous data.